to the cloud. Okay, welcome everyone to the Aether TST. This meeting is recorded and will be made available to members. So please keep that in mind during discussions on this call. We'll start with our Aether deployment. Well, let's start with the introductions first. If you'd like to introduce new people, Timon.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the attendees. So Siva's on the call. So Siva just, I want to introduce to everybody. Siva just recently joined ONF as the head of engineering. Siva is somebody that I worked with in the past, both at Ericsson and then back a little ways at Extreme. And Siva, why don't you say a little something, introduce yourself.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. As Timon mentioned, I've got background in edge routing as well as mobile packet core from Ericsson days, and security and routing in Juniper Cisco, and then as Timon mentioned, we work together at Extreme. So I've got a lot of background in the networking industry and security side, and looking forward to working with everybody and essentially keeping ONF as a central figure in the open networking world.
Yeah, very nice to meet you, Siva.
Pleasure to meet you too.
So, yeah.
And we have a couple of others who have joined. Actually, I see Amol just, I think, connected in, and maybe Amol, if you're in a suitable spot, you could fire up your camera. But Amol just recently joined as well. Amol is going to be, kind of rolling up his sleeves and diving into Aether, and I think he's already started to, start to deploy on his own, and maybe he's been in communication with some of you as he's been trying to solve problems. Amol was most recently at Brookhaven National Labs, kind of running a bunch of the infrastructure for the back end of their particle collider kind of stuff, and really pleased to have Amol joining us. And Amol, you want to say a little something? Say hi to everyone.
Thank you for the introduction, Timon. Hello. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello. Hey.
I was working in the Brookhaven National Lab for the infrastructure. I used to manage their library pipeline and data pipeline both. The infrastructure was a little different, but conceptually probably the same. This is a great opportunity for me to joining this team. I'm looking forward to make a good contribution in the community regarding the ONF. Thank you very much for giving me time to tell about myself.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And then so we have two others who are not on the call. I'm looking at the attendees, and I wasn't necessarily expecting them, but you'll probably bump into them at some point in time. We have David, who joined, who was at VMware for many years, started doing infrastructure there when it was 60 engineers, kind of ending when it was 15,000 engineers, and then did some other things after that. And then also Joey Armstrong, who is focusing on Volta, just so you know. But he comes from, like, in his background, he was doing release management for Mozilla and for MATLAB, among lots of different other things as well in his background. So I think as of just yesterday or so, really 4 new heads with ONF. So, but enough on that. I don't want to take up the whole agenda on that. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thank you, and look forward to meeting in time as well. So next up, deployment update.
Scott, your voice is breaking up. I don't know. Is it from
here? Let me move a little bit closer. Am I better now?
Yes, I think that's better.
Okay, that's good, because next up is Andy. Deployment brigade update.
All right. Yeah, I've tried to summarize here some of the deployment related issues and questions that people have had, both on Slack and also some of them through other channels. So I'll just walk down the list here. So Gabrielle Arobo is working in Christian's group at Intel, and he's in the process of kind of walking through the Ether in a Box documentation and trying to figure out what's confusing, and is submitting a couple of patches to that. So that's great. We're getting some contributions from him. One of the things that he has been asking about, he's interested in understanding, is how to add a second slice to Ether in a Box on hardware. So Ether in a Box comes up and it's got a single slice and a single UPF, but there's not really any documentation or example on how you would go about adding another slice. And this is probably more important in the context of Ether in a Box on hardware. That's where we might expect people to want to have another slice. But it seems like the kind of thing that could easily be illustrated in like the normal Ether in a Box.
Yeah, I wonder if it's better to like build it into the Ether in a Box configuration so you can bring it up that way, or better to document the workflow and have people do it manually using the GUI like they would in production. And whether the second one is feasible as is in Ether in a Box, or do you need to do networking changes and such to make it work?
Hey, Scott and Andy, I had discussion with the Gabriel yesterday. We did a lot of groundwork there. Hopefully he will be able to get the second UPF up. I asked him to probably contribute it back once it works. Let's hope he comes back. Yeah. But yeah,
Okay,
but that was more on the we definitely might need some changes into the Aether in a Box and some models, or addition of some extra configuration there. But yeah, we found most of the things, and it's something should be available soon. Yeah.
Okay, good. Getting it in the docs, I think it'd be really handy.
Yeah.
This makes me think of two things, questions. So one is a higher level question about Ether roadmap. Well, I'm not aware of a document that's tracking. Let's see, do you have it? Or are you just going to add it?
Yeah.
So is there such a document out there?
Well, we discussed it last week, and what we may have discussed was, we discussed what our priorities are. I don't think we've created the roadmap document though, so we probably need to make that document and then populate it out with the priorities, and then the milestones we want to achieve and when.
Right. Yeah. So it would be good to start capturing that, and hopefully soon we'll start having maybe a little bit of capacity to start dealing with that or thinking about it. Well, I also understand there's kind of I don't know what I call it, sort of an interim release or a 1.5 code base that hasn't been dropped. Do I have that right?
Well, there's 2 point, there may be different versions for different parts of the project, but for the rock and such, we have 2.1, I think, that is waiting to come out. That's been sitting on the shelf for a few months. I don't know if Core also has anything that was like sitting on the shelf when we transitioned.
AJ, do you know?
If you're talking, AJ, you're on mute.
The question is about the release.
Yeah, if you have anything unreleased that is waiting.
We do have a lot of things unreleased, but we were at the same time waiting for the at least CI run on it before we release the software.
Yeah,
since
so it's one of the
say-
things
yeah.
that is blocking us is we're still working on getting staging and other stuff up to be able to do qualify a release.
And just a question mark regarding the initial, where we started off with this discussion in terms of multiple UPFs for Ether in a Box. Is there any sense of why this is desirable? What would the use case be?
So I think the use case is if people want to understand how to add a second UPF and a second slice to their deployment. So I guess my thinking about Ether in a box is its real value is sort of its documentation by a working example. And so, because there's a lot of pieces that kind of need to fit together, and we can write documentation, but at least for me and the way I think, the most valuable thing is having something that already works that I can play with and kind of take apart and see how things kind of work together. And so if it's something that people want to do in general in the full Ether, then at least from my perspective, it makes sense to show them a path in this more constrained Ether in a box environment.
Okay. That rationale makes sense. I guess the question would then turn to, okay, so how many times are we deploying multiple UPFs in full-blown Ether?
So I think, yeah, that's that's how I interpreted your question. And the argument is every slice potentially could get its own UPF for isolation purposes, in particular, and eventually customization purposes.
Right. That's the way we're deploying Ether right now. With each slice has its own UPF. So if you want to have 2 slices, then you need 2 UPFs, and that's where things get kind of complicated.
And what if you want to have 2 sites? Is that the sort of the exact same thing? It's 2 slices, 2 UPFs, or is that sort of orthogonal?
Well, I guess each site, I think, would have its own set of UPFs.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean, right now, the way we are deploying Ether in a box, the control plane and everything is located at the same place as the edge. So I mean, it's kind of an all-in-one. So I think multiple sites, you'd want to go to some kind of a hybrid deployment where you separated, the control plane and the rock from the UPF. You'd want to introduce that hybrid model, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot we were talking about Ether in the box.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
So
to me, it seems reasonable to have limitations or restrictions of Ether in the box, and maybe it doesn't support this multi-site example you were saying there, Timon. But I do take your point, Andy, of it should at least allow the learning phase of figuring out how to do it without requiring the complete hardware and physical distribution that you're looking for.
So related topic is that there was a body of work we will recall around a user interface and more of an end user interface that would allow slice creation, management, monitoring. And I guess I'm curious the extent to which we're talking about doing some work to make kind of slice creation possible, if it would be smarter to kind of be leveraging that user interface work that never really got completed. It was basically, I mean, just for those who are new here, it was it was kind of a whole built out user interface that wasn't then wired to the actual implementation, right? So it's kind of like a whole model for how to monitor, maintain, and run an Ether network.
Well, we have Sean here. He could speak as to the gap between that user interface and the reality necessary to make it work. I think the gap may be considerable.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge gap that required, lots of back-end facilities that didn't even exist in Ether, such as like the analytics engine and, even the GUI front end as it stood was never really functional, and I mean it was going to take a lot of work really to get it to a state where you could have it operating like it was envisaged by product management. Now, if you want, I mean, I could talk, numbers and estimates, but I mean, I'm talking, several man months, several, yeah, I'm loath to say dozens, but like, I mean, it's over 10, I'm saying anyway, to get it to even partially work, I would say.
That's good. It's good to have a rough order of magnitude estimate. Thank you.
I mean, there is a user interface there that's simply for configuration alone. I mean, I presume you've seen that. It's for configuration alone and not so much monitoring. I guess the plan, or maybe the kind of status with Aether, is that Grafana was there as a separate GUI to do the monitoring, and the configuration GUI was a separate GUI for doing configuration.
Yeah, on the subject of monitoring, something that we talked about last time is, going back to the context of Ether in a box. For Ether in a box on hardware for 4G, there's a very simple monitoring stack that you can set up with Prometheus and Grafana that shows you a dashboard that shows you like the active UEs and some stats that you're getting from the UPF in terms of things like throughput. That same thing doesn't exist. That monitoring stack with the dashboard doesn't exist for Ether in a box on 5G. A number of people have asked about that, and it seems like it would be a useful thing to have, but at least in terms of like operations, most of our effort in the past has been on the 4G Ether stack, and so we don't have quite the level of operational support built up for 5G.
Yeah, so you answered my question. So does that mean it is there for 4G and not 5G? So thanks for answering that. Is there a sense of how large the effort is to get the sort of equivalent for 5G?
I would guess it's like the 4G stuff could be used as a pretty good template. The main questions I think are related to kind of mapping the metrics that we're getting out of the 4G services, mapping those onto 5G. And if there's a straightforward mapping, this has just got a different name now, then maybe it's not much work at all. But if the metrics have changed significantly, then it might be more effort to think through what the stack should look like.
Okay, right. I mean, just from prior experience, I don't think there's a massive difference. Certainly, there is in nomenclature, but not necessarily functionality. So, but I think it requires a little more, a more in-depth investigation to figure out.
Another thing that pops to mind is because we've never really tried to use the 5G metrics in an operational context. I don't know how much confidence we can have that they're actually accurate, but that doesn't mean we couldn't still set up the dashboard and let people take a look at them. That might be the first step to figuring that out.
Yeah, seeing them is the first step towards determining correctness.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so we got kind of jumped down into Ether roadmap stuff, which is all actually really good. These have been questions in my mind. Should we go back up to the?
Sure. Andy, continue, please.
Right. So Christian's group is also requesting a tutorial that we already have a lot of this information, but maybe I think he expects something more unified. He was asking for a tutorial from scratch on the full Ether solution, like starting to how do you set it up, how do you configure it, how to onboard the devices, you know, how to configure slicing, trying to understand the differences between Ether in a box, you know, the kind of learning platform and the full Ether solution. You know, so he's, I guess, asking sort of for the end product of this entire brigade in a way. But yeah, there's interest, and I think he like Gabriel has been tasked to look at this. I think there's some interest on his side into figuring out how to help with that and move it forward.
And when does he need this? Does he need this like last week already? I mean, is he actively trying to deploy either right now?
I think there are groups that are trying to deploy Ether, but yeah, I don't know specifically any kind of timelines or details about like why he needs this and what he wants to do.
I mean, I tend to agree that all of those are valuable things to have, and I sort of envision a multi-episode tutorial of, okay, you move from chapter 1 of how to set it up to how to configure it and so on, and there's advanced topics like network slicing that go on. From my perspective, this seems like yet another roadmap item of you got to deliver the training as well as the product.
So how is this different than the documenting effort we have around Ether and Ether in the box?
Yeah, so the way I was thinking about it is like the Ether deployment brigade, like the end goal is basically to have what Christian wants, and we don't have it yet. But
yeah, I mean, it feels we
go
certainly
ahead.
have a documentation goal that it all ought to be there in the docs, but a tutorial feels to me like it's more procedural, like it's us on video walking through all the motions. That feels like maybe a slightly bigger ask than just bringing the docs up to date.
It also strikes me that bringing the docs up to date is a prerequisite to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and it also strikes me that we've got a bit of a moving target because we know we're iterating on the docs, we keep discovering new things, and then at the point in time when you do this tutorial, it's almost kind of freezing, a snapshot.
Yeah, the tutorials are always out of date, has been my observation. You make a nice demo, you market it, and it's sort of immediately becomes dated and inaccurate and useless. So if at all, I would encourage us not to do a tutorial, but to bring the docs up to date to the point where a person can follow the docs and know how to do the tasks he wants to do.
I tend to concur with your point of view there that they're very quickly out of date. Although I can still see a value of doing a tutorial around kind of the Ether in a box for university training, kind of bring up where you're dealing with a less experienced person.
Yeah.
And that one may be much more limited in scope.
Yeah, that may work. Yeah.
Kind of along with that, I think it's something that we've thought about in the past. It would be nice for the more limited Ether in a box scope to have like a larger set of kind of exercises that you could do to get familiar with different aspects of the system, like little, homeworks or something, little labs. That's something that isn't really there.
Yeah, like add a second slice.
Yeah, that's the final exam.
You're able to successfully pass this.
So somebody recently pointed out that do we have when we're done installing Ether in the box, does it do something that's gratifying enough for the person to feel a sense of accomplishment?
depends on how excited they are about seeing 5 pings between 2 containers. For me, it would be quite gratifying when I actually saw it work, but you know, the one on real radios, you know, on physical hardware, that is much more gratifying in that you actually have hardware in your hand, it's able to communicate, and you could in theory set QoS and stuff on it. So I guess maybe there's a line between the fully simulated Ether in a box and the physical hardware. The physical hardware can be much more compelling.
Having just done this last week, and you know, owing Andy some beer as a result of questions, you know, you get it set up, and then I have to admit, it's, you know, it's a bit of a, okay, now what? I don't see, you know, there's very little to see.
Yeah.
So it's not particularly gratifying to install it, and I wonder if there is some mechanism we can think of to have more synthetic traffic generated, right? Kind of a fake UE that you can create to drive traffic, because I think that would then start to move towards, well, this is what it'll look like when you get real UEs and when there's real radio.
So if we could send video to a simulated UE, that would be more compelling. And you could have the exercise of being able to change the bit rate and see it affected on the video.
That would certainly be much more visually compelling.
Yeah.
But something that you know, you're in control of. You can say, okay, well, I got traffic to go from, you know, kind of outside, you know, kind of through this whole set of capability, whole set of functions, independent of instantiating those functions themselves.
Yeah, even if you could send arbitrary traffic / your own application would be really nice. AJ would be the one to have an opinion on what it would take to do more than just send pings to the simulated UE.
So
All I've ever done is send pings.
But in my opinion, I mean, every individual may have different opinion. I mean, for me, even the bringing up the simulated UE in the AIB environment, and I'm able to learn something about 5G, that itself is a great deal for many. I mean, it's, I mean, yeah, I mean, what will you do? While, like, let's say you have one real mobile and you have access to some websites or videos, and now what, right? And then what? I mean, then is that the only thing you want to do? I mean, probably many of our users, they really want to use Aether, and they want to do something within the Aether framework. Like some people want to try out UPF changes, some people want to try out control plane changes. So they are fine with the AIB, with even the simulated environment, because that's where they get more flexibility. Hardware doesn't give you that, all those things, right? So I mean, it really depends on the who is user. Most of the time I have met the users who are happy with the simulated environments, and they are able to evaluate our control plane functionality or user plane functionality without investing much.
So you're talking about relatively high functioning people who understand the implementations of the control plane or the UPF. So
yeah, if you see, right, I mean, we don't get any operator directly and trying out Aether. We get people, they take our code, they evaluate, and then they go to operators, right? And those people, they definitely want to evaluate it. Yeah, I mean, they definitely would like to see the hardware eNodeB or gNodeB working with our stack. That's fine. But to exercise the whole functionality, they definitely rely on the simulated environments.
But it sounds like what you're saying is that there are a number of different personas of users of Ethernet in a box, and you know, kind of going back to the tutorials, you know, they may be appropriate for some, but not necessarily valuable to others. But we should probably define what types of personas we're going after, and you know, what set of capabilities we need to wrap around Ether for each of these personas that we want to pursue. And you know, the answer may be, you know, hey, pings are enough.
Yeah, so the personas range from kind of the extremely knowledgeable, people who are coding 5G as their source of income, to people who are university researchers, completely brand new, don't even know if they want to work in the mobile space, just want to download this, try it out, and see it do something exciting. So a whole continuum, I think.
Yeah, no, I tend to, I think there is a whole continuum, and we probably just need to create some set of packages and go after them in somewhat of a prioritized order to say, okay, for this group of people and for this group of people and for that, get another group of people.
Yeah. Yeah, then of course you're right. People with bringing new hardware to, see if their G node B is Ether compliant.
Right.
Well, I think from a roadmap perspective, we need to rank order these persona.
Yeah.
Yeah. But before continuing, shall we let Andy make his next few points on the on his brigade?
Yeah, I'll try to go quickly because, this is just one thing on the agenda, although it does seem like it's getting a lot of good discussion going. So there's somebody on the community that just reports all of these bizarre connectivity issues in his Ethernet box setup. Some of them seem to be transitory, and he doesn't, they just disappear, and he doesn't know.
So just to give context, Andy, these are the CPQD guys. They have big projects similar to Aether in Brazil, if I'm not wrong. Right, Timon, and they may contribute a lot in our project if they continue to use Aether.
Yeah, I can't confirm that Daniel's from CPQD, but CPQD.
Yeah, no, he was there in our meeting, and yes, he's from CPQD. That I can confirm. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got government funding for 3 years. They're buying a big bomb, and that's basically the Internet 2 of Brazil with 2,000 universities, and they're starting by connecting 2 sites, with Ether. So that's background.
Yeah, Andy.
So, right, so he reports seeing connectivity issues that to me just don't really make sense. And I don't know how to really help him. I know AJ has also been trying to help him as well. And it's interesting that you told me that context. So maybe there's, there should be some priority given to trying to help him, debug these issues.
Andy, for clarification, is this a thread that went on in Slack?
Yeah, there's some. It's all on Slack.
Yeah.
And
okay.
yeah, he reports, debugging the system. The packet makes it to this spot, and then it just disappears. You can't figure out why. To me, it sounds like it could be some kind of firewall thing going on the node, but I don't have any verification of that. I asked him to check some things, but firewalls can be an issue for sure. So this week, this past week, we got development virtual machines from our employer, and I was trying to set up Ether in a box in one of these VMs, and it just wasn't working because of some firewall rules that the IT security had installed in there. So I want to add something to the documentation about firewalls and how they can impact Ether in a box.
My take on this one is make no firewall a requirement is probably a good short-term step, but ultimately defining what firewall rules are, in particular what access rules are required becomes the real need, because we don't want to strip out security for the sake of brevity.
And so where is a firewall? I mean, so Ether in the box is like one system. So where's the firewall getting access to the traffic? Just between the containers?
So is this issue proxies, like not being able to pull down artifacts, or is this an issue of a host firewall?
It was a host firewall. So traffic between the containers, some traffic in Kubernetes will go through the host network. And if there's a host firewall on the machine, then that traffic can get blocked and containers can't talk to each other. So yeah, by no firewall, I guess I meant no firewall running on the host machine itself that is running Ether in a box. Firewalls or proxies upstream are fine. And I think there's already some documentation on how to deal with that case.
Seems like firewalls have continually been a thorn in deploying Ether, either here in a host firewall or, if you between the cloud and the edge. It would be wonderful to just have a little script that just tested the different protocols that you need to have, punched through the firewall. I don't know how hard that would be to do.
Yeah, diagnostic tools have always been something we wished we had more of, that we spend too much time manually diagnosing things that a tool should be able to tell you that something is broken.
Right, so basically an environment verifier before you spend, pointing fingers at Ether. Would be wonderful.
Having the set of firewall rules that have to be implemented is a starting point to say, well, it should be set up this way if it's there at all. But firewalls are just notoriously difficult to deal with because they black hole stuff on purpose.
Yep. Okay, should we keep pounding ahead in the interest of time?
Yep. Somebody else reporting had reported poor Ether in a box on hardware performance. He said he was able to solve the problem by disabling TX offloading. I'm trying to get some details from him exactly what he did. I think he just recently posted something, but I haven't had a chance to review it yet. But if it's something straightforward that we can add to the docs, then we can do that. On Slack, somebody had an issue with generating certs when installing Cube Spray for Ether in a box. I don't know, Zach maybe had some insights there. I just see here.
I looked at this. Kiel, whose arm had an issue inside of Cube Spray, inside of Ansible, and the error code he was getting off of it looked like it was like 127, which in a shell script means, and using Bash, which I think was being used, means that it could not find a binary in the path variable. So he probably didn't have maybe some prerequisite installed on the system that was being controlled by Ansible. So I got back to him and he said that he got beyond that and might be running into other issues, but I haven't heard anything else reported back. So I think this is addressed. I'm sort of waiting for him to, if he has any other updates, to get back to us about them.
And this is another thing, if we had a verifier tool, it could have ensured that all of Ansible's dependencies and software packages.
This isn't Ansible. This is inside Cube Spray, which is just another tool we're using.
But Cube Spray required something to be installed on the host that wasn't there? Or this was just
inside,
okay.
I think one of the VMs or whatever it's using.
And could it have just been a transient network failure that something just failed to download? And
no, the traceback message that he had was basically the shell exited with status 127. And if you load up a shell, type garbage in, hit return, and then write echo dollar question, and you'll see that it also returns 127.
Yeah.
So it's an issue with something command not being found.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we'll see what he has, if what further progress he's able to make.
Okay, so the last thing that I had was someone trying to set up a distributed Ether with a central core in the cloud, and UPF at the edge is, I think, was still blocked on VPN setup directions. We talked about this last time. I gave him some suggestions on how to proceed without a VPN, just by using node ports to allow the edge and the core to talk to each other. And that seemed like it might be adequate for what he was doing, which was basically just kind of proof of concept. He didn't really need the encryption that VPN also provides. But one thing that came out of that conversation is, if we want to, try to help people wrap their heads around the distributed Ether model, then maybe there's another tweak to Ether in a box. We could have Ether in 2 boxes that shows how it's done. One of them running the UPF and the simulated eNode B, and the other one running the core. That would probably be fairly straightforward and might be useful to people. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I can see the value of doing that, because it seems like very much a stepping stone towards full-blown radio connection as well.
Well, not necessarily. We definitely want Ether in a box on one system to be able to work with a real radio.
Yeah.
So this is kind of expanding in the other direction towards the core. But we already have, I don't know how this is different than running Ether, from the cloud and the edge. Maybe it's local. I guess we talk about it as local cloud or just a local Kubernetes cluster, even if it's on one server. Larry, this is kind of similar or related to the stepping stone kind of work and that kind of document you wrote up. Remember?
Yeah, I'm trying to swap it back in.
Yeah, it's basically that, how can somebody start with Ether in the box and add a radio, and then add a centralized, Ether central, and then add multiple edges, kind of how to progress into more and more complex configurations.
And
the 2 box, maybe going back a little bit to where Andy started here, the Ether in 2 boxes makes quite a bit of sense. As a small step in that direction.
I'm just not sure how it's different than running, just the core in one Kubernetes cluster and the edge, the UPF, in another cluster.
Well, it's not. In some sense, it's not. Except, Ether in a box is no different than running Ether. It's just, it's a simplified, maybe a little bit streamlined setup process.
Yeah, so what the user is trying to do is set up exactly that full Ether of the edge and the core being separate, and is trying to follow our documentation and is not being able to get there.
Right.
And so so that's what he's trying to do, and he can't do it. So trying to figure out how to give him that stepping stone.
Got it.
Then this is also the stepping stone to having two or more edges as well, if they wanted to try that.
Arguably, Ether in a box becomes more and more important because the full-blown system, well, A, it's a little bit complex, and B, it's maybe not as documented as well. And so it's almost putting a Band-Aid over those flaws by giving them something that's simpler. And then what you end up doing is you keep building out the capabilities of that simpler thing. Until you add back in all the features, you get back to the original system, I suppose. So that's the risk here.
So it strikes me listening to this discussion that we don't really prescribe what those stepping stones are. And maybe that's worth both describing and prioritizing what we're
yeah,
what we're gonna support.
that's the document that Timon was referring to. We
Okay.
kind of mapped out a process, wrote it down, and then set it on the back burner and forgot about it and solved today's immediate problem.
Okay, so let's maybe resurrect it.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but I'm looking for it.
Well, but I mean, the flip side of this is today's immediate problem is what our users have. So it cuts both ways.
Agreed, but I think from our perspective, we should decide, okay, these are the stepping stones, but we're only going to support the simple one today, and these other ones come tomorrow and the day after, kind of thing. And to me, that's tied back to what are those user personas.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have two reasonable stepping stones now, which are, either in a box, sort of an all-in-one simulated deployment, and then the one with the physical radios. It seems like that encompasses a large quantity of the type of personas we might encounter. This next stepping stone, either in 2 boxes, it'll fit a few more people, but there's probably not that many people who really need to try this out, who shouldn't be just going and trying to do a production deployment if they really want to do a hybrid cloud and edge.
Yeah.
They should just take the leap rather than taking a baby step to either in a box on 2 boxes. Take the leap and just follow our documentation and do the full-blown thing.
Yeah, and I think it's valuable for us to say that explicitly.
Yeah.
Not to be a broken record though, but that's exactly what this guy is trying to do, and he's failing.
Sorry, he's trying to make that step to a physical radio, or he's just trying to take the baby step, Andy.
He's trying to make the leap from Ether in a box to the full distributed deployment, and he's not able to do it. And specifically, the reason why he's not able to do it is because in the documentation, it talks about what you need to do to set up the VPN connection between the edge and the core, except at least the way I read it, the whole slant there is based on the way that ONF used to deploy Ether when ONF was actually managing it. So it's using our repo with our credentials in it, adding some stuff, and then our Jenkins is actually going and setting up the VPN. It doesn't address like how you would do it if you didn't have access to all of this machinery.
We've got a specific solution, not a generalized solution.
Yeah, right.
Okay, that's a good gap to sort through.
Okay, yeah, I think this is maybe the first time I've seen this one. I'm not sure. Stage 1 is Ether in a box. Stage 2 is clouds. Okay.
We came to understandings that probably didn't get recorded there. Sun made some progress, and don't take this as gospel. It's a snapshot at one point in time of something, a thought process, if you will.
Yeah, and from approximately April. Okay, thanks.
It's a great starting point, though.
Yeah. What else do we have to discuss in roadmap? I think we finished Andy's list of brigade topics for the week. maybe an exercise for next week would be to rank personas and rank various things on the roadmap and figure out what should get done sooner rather than later.
We could just sort of, is that a roadmap document started, maybe even a copy and paste of a bunch of these things, so we can then start to massage it.
Yeah. So Michelle or Joe, can you create that document on ONF infrastructure? And then we can work on populating it. We may not have them with us anymore. So Joe, how do I, yeah. Is it only, it's only gonna find Intel people. Yeah, someone please, please leave a comment to Michelle or Joe and ask them to create a document for us. Or has Timon already done so?
Yeah, I just created it.
All right. Now you need to give me access to it. Okay. The one thing I put down at the bottom was, you know, the standalone edge. We had a couple meetings with I think they were Christian's people, and we had Brent, one of our Intel Labs guys, and we sort of concluded that making the standalone deployment less of a follow this document and more of a Git ops based deployment would be a good idea. But maybe longer term, and I don't know that we had anyone to task to do that. I think Zach and Brent were looking into that, but are there any next steps on that, Zach, or is it kind of, are other things higher priority?
I'm working on that, but I'm also juggling a whole bunch of other organizational stuff. But I can get that out in, yeah, I want to add to the document. And it's, I'm guessing one of the other questions, I've been working through this just in locally, but if I want to share that, is it the best way to do that in addition to the doc that Hinson started, or do I add to that doc, or what do people think the best way to go about that is? Is this a totally separate thing, or is this adding on to what we already have?
I see it as a separate thing. I mean, it's just my thought, is a separate thing in that, you know, the doc describes a manual process, and if you want to have an automated process, maybe it's a second thing that'll eventually supersede the first. I'd be curious, Ken Soon's thoughts on this, how she sees it.
I wasn't able to attend that meeting, but can you explain a little bit about what's GitOps centric?
Yeah, we're basically talking about the standalone edge document. And I'm having to remember a little bit of context from last week too, but you know, the standalone edge, it seemed like there were a lot of manual steps in it, and people were looking for a way to automate deployment of standalone edges. You know, if they're doing many production standalone edges, you know, bring them all up with a repeatable process.
Oh, I see. So, yeah, because the existing approach suggests to deploy the application using GitOps, but bringing up the Kubernetes cluster, configuring the cluster, and bootstrapping the lower layer is mostly manual step. I guess they want those steps to be GitOps, like we did with Aether production.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's
I see.
Exactly the ask.
So the thought that I was working through with Brent was, we're not going to tell people that they need to set up a full Jenkins and GitHub or Garrett or whatever infrastructure. The thought we were thinking is to keep everything at the edge was to figure out a way to have to have Git maybe on one of the nodes, maybe just shared out with SSH access, people who are involved in it could just SSH in and push there. There would be no CI to speak of, nothing preventing someone from overwriting master or anything. That would be but it would give a place that Fleet or something else could use to pull changes from. Also, doing more to document how to do a bring up of some of the lower level parts with Ansible.
I see. I see.
That's what I've been working towards.
I see.
And I think it would close a few of the gaps, and then also make it very obvious where you would go to add in like CI on top of that. It would just be having a CI system that's more integrated with the code repos.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. That would be a good addition to make either deployment to more production grade. The doc about the original question, the document that I created was
Hello.
hello. So
You're back.
yeah, the document that I created was a kind of draft. I originally planned to contribute it to the Ether docs site, docs.ether project.org. So I think you may not need to append the document to add this additional stuff and directly contribute to the official Ether docs. I may need to find some time to contribute my document back to the official Ether docs as well. But yeah, I don't think you necessarily need to append the existing document for the additional stuff.
Okay, that makes sense. I will do that, and if I have time, I'll start maybe moving some of the stuff that you have in that doc over. If you're running out of time, and I'm going to be editing the docs anyway.
Sure.
I
Okay.
think that document is the last one I went through in the meeting.
Okay.
Zach, sorry to ask a dumb question. When you talked to a couple bullets up, no CI in phase one, just run typical. What does CI stand for in that sentence?
Continuous integration.
Yeah, previously we would have things of like somebody would push a git commit and they would have to go through a code review process.
And that was my computer. I think code inspection or
yeah. So if you just set up Git on a user account and have people being able to push to it, it just gets overwritten. There's no there's no process between publishing it and there's no automated process that can do checks or other stuff. Okay. So we would get history and we would get interaction with Fleet, but we wouldn't get code review.
Okay. I think I want to understand that in more detail, but not in this meeting.
Okay, we're approximately at time and we're at the end of the agenda. Anything more?
I have a quick question. In the roadmap, I saw there are some blockers related to staging environment.
Was that? I don't know if that was that was when we were talking about release.
Yeah,
up here.
Yeah. Do you know which environment is this? Is that the one in Jones Farm or the one in the QA environment in the Colo?
I think I was talking, when I say, blocked on staging, I mean, I think that's the staging pod.
Yeah, so it belongs to the Pronto project, right?
Yeah.
Jones Farm. Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Jones Farm one.
Okay.
Jones Farm Pronto. And Hung Wei, it sounded like, from this morning's ops call, you had made progress on this. The next thing was some issue with SD Fabric. Was that right?
Yeah, correct. So still working with the Charles, and maybe can fix today or tomorrow because Charles is working on look up some servers in Intel today.
Yeah. And is the sense that we're like 90% there on getting staging back up, or where are we? It seems to me like we're in the final parts of the process. Is that accurate?
I think so. The control plane is ready. I believe Andy already configured the runtime ROC as well. And this morning, Hongwei and I confirmed that eNode B is connected to the MME. So once the SD Fabric is fixed, I think we can start end-to-end testing.
Yeah, I think in the staging we'll use the P4 UPF, right?
Yeah, we used to have P4 UPF and 3 more best UPF slices. But for release, I think probably we need to enable the best UPF as well for the release. That'll be not too much work once the user plane connectivity is confirmed with P4 UPF.
But we have only one eNode B in a staging.
It's a slice, so one eNode B, yes, will be okay.
But I guess your point, Hung, yeah, so it's per slice, so one, yeah, sure. Okay,
yeah.
And do we want to say 3 best UPFs or just 1 or more?
Do we have so it depends on how many devices we have.
3 Raspberry Pi.
3 Raspberry Pi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have 4 slices if we add 3 more best UPFs, but we have 3 devices. So I think just 1 or 2, best UPF would be enough.
Just to level set everybody, and especially some of the new people here. So this is all infrastructure that's really owned and managed by Intel. It's kind of being funded through the Pronto project that kind of moved from ONF to Intel. Sounds like you guys are using this platform to verify sort of some of this, ROC 2.0 or 2.1 into unreleased code that's then going to get that pushed or released to open source. Is that a correct summary?
Yeah, I mean, just traditionally staging, we've used it to qualify releases. So in the absence of something else, it's what we would use.
And should ONF be setting up kind of comparable community infrastructure or taking this over?
Yeah, if you guys want to own a release process for Aether, and it seems to me it would be really handy if you did own a release process, then you should set up a staging pod and a production pod.
Yeah, I'd like to see the notes or configuration for the setup pod, and I actually have about a dozen Raspberry Pi sitting beside me if that's a viable platform.
Those are just for clients. So for the pod itself, you'll need real servers of sufficient beefiness.
That's what I thought.
An eNode B, a P4 switch if you want to do the P4 UPF.
Well, I think my sense of it is we'll need a range of different configurations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we have done deployments on Intel NUCs before, a single NUC for an Ether at home deployment, we called them. Yeah. So you could have lesser, but traditionally something like our staging pod is 3 decent sized servers, a management server, a P4 switch.
And for the time being, we do have the Tucson office, which does have some servers, some eNode Bs, and various other pieces of equipment. And we'll have that until I think June 2023, if you want to use that.
And there are QA pod in Colo as well. I think Abhilash is working on making it work, but I'm not sure.
So the Colo is fine for for testing that doesn't need the radio hardware, but we
Oh,
would
there's
need-
no, I see. There's
yeah,
no
in the
radio.
colo.
You can't connect anything to it.
Only NG40, I guess.
Yeah.
I had heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, that there were some troubles getting the colo the colo facility working. Do we know if it's working as expected?
So there's some issues with some of the networks, at least one of the 40 gig network switches that we had there. We got a replacement for that, and but the problem is now software configuration of that. I can point you in the right direction.
Thank you, appreciate it.
With those sorts of things.
Okay.
And a related question. So this Jones Farm Pronto staging pod, is that also running the AMD servers that were donated by AMD?
No, those
No.
are in Tucson or in Stanford. There are
Right.
two sets. One is 4 servers that are in Tucson. Another is 4 servers, one of which I don't think has ever been working. That was in the Stanford pod location.
All right. So, I mean, maybe to summarize this, it sounds like this info's going to get used for this next release or this next tranche, but ONF should be trying to figure out how to create a community-based resource for release management
Right.
going forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And Tucson is the likely candidate since we need radios. Unless we figure something else out.
And then what about a facility once Tucson goes away? It's it was really handy for us to be able to deploy production network with 3 Node Bs, half a dozen Raspberry Pis, in several rooms. Do you have a place where you could? I mean, you don't have the office anymore, so where else would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, right now the only thing we really have in hand is Tucson, right?
Yeah.
And we have the better part of a year to figure it out. But the question's a good one. It's
I think there needs to be some kind of setup like that for this to be effective. What the answer ends up being, open to discussion, but we've got to have this.
Yeah, this was like hugely useful to us. Whoops, what did I just do? Hugely useful to us was to have this sort of simulated production facility with real equipment mounted on the walls and and all of that. And lacking that would hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of develop lots and lots of products, and you have to have some place where you can use the real thing in close to real environments as you want to make it.
Exactly. Yeah, we did a lot of experiments where people would check how many radios can you deploy and set the limits on them so that they can all work and do a handoff from one to another, and various things you can't do in one of these colo facilities. Though maybe we could do it in Jones Farm. I've never been to the Jones Farm building, so I don't know what the lab is like there.
Yeah, I don't either. It's certainly a worth investigating, but I think this sort of, if we're going to say Aether does this, we have to have enough confidence to know it actually did it. We tested it.
Yeah, that's exactly where we were.
Where is Jones Farm?
Jones Farm is up here in Oregon.
Hillsboro.
Yeah.
East of Portland or west of Portland.
West of Portland? Isn't that the Pacific Ocean?
Not that far.
I'm just kidding. I've driven through Portland a lot, but haven't gone west.
Okay. We're a little past time now. Anything else people like to discuss before we close it up?
Just want to say thank you. This was good. I think we made some good progress today.
Good. Yeah, and it is nice meeting new people. Look forward to working together.
Absolutely. Good to meet everybody here. Nice to put at least some voices, if not some faces, with some names.
Maybe we'll turn on some cameras for you next time. I usually don't run with mine, but it's here. I could have plugged it in.
Not a problem. All right. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye
you.
all.
Bye all. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.